and welcome to my books you should read in 2022 video. So if you don't already know, I absolutely love to read. I spend a lot of time doing it. Last year I was able to read 45 books. So I am picking out my favorites from the past year and sharing them with you. We have several from different categories. I did end up reading a lot of historical fiction last year just because I kind of got into it. So there are 4 books in that categories, but they're all from different time periods and about different things. They're not all just World War II books and stuff. But then I have stuff from nonfiction, and we have a little bit of thriller, and then a little bit of just normal fiction too. So I'm excited to share them all with you today. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to be sharing is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Most of you have probably already heard of this book. It's been popular for several years now since it came out. Everyone talks about it, and so that's why I finally decided to read it, just because I wondered if it was interesting. And it is so cool because it is different from your normal self-help, here's how to make habits and break bad ones. It's different and it's more simple and, in my opinion, more attainable, the way that he explains how to build your habits. He goes over 4 different laws that there are to setting habits and how you can make them more easily attainable. It's really interesting because it's just it's like they say, atomic habits. It's small changes over time that really add up and really ingrain these habits to become more of a personal thing. And I say that no matter how good you are at keeping habits and routines already, or how happy you are with them, you can still benefit from this book because it just has a lot of great tips just for living your life healthier and happier. And so I did really enjoy this book, and I did consider it different than other typical self-help habit forming books. So great recommendation for that. Okay, moving on to book number 2. This is The 4 Winds by Kristen Hanna. This was another really big book that came out last year, and people were very excited for it. If you don't know Kristen Hanna, she's a really, really popular historical fiction author. And this book was really good. I wasn't sure how it was going to be just from reading the description of it, but I decided to give it a try. It takes place in the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression era, and the people that had to decide whether to flee their homes to go west to California from the Dust Bowl or to stay behind. And so it deals with that, and this woman Elsa deals with that in her family, and she lives a very, very sad and hard life. And so this book is very heavy and it's very sad, but it taught me a lot about things like the Dust Bowl. I knew hardly anything about that, and in the Great Depression we all know about, but it took a different aspect on it. So it was really interesting, and it was really sad. So if you're not really into heavy, sad books, this kind of is on that side. But it also is really well written. The story is captivating, and it really provokes a lot of emotion that these people probably felt during this time period. And I really felt for Elsa during this, and it's sad, but it's written so well. It will really put you into these people's lives and their perspective and really feel for them. So this is another great read. Okay, and then book number 3 is The Book of Lost Names by Kristen Harmel. I'm not sure how you say that, but this is actually a World War II book, and I have read my fair share of historical fiction World War II based books, but this one was really good to me, and I really, really enjoyed this and considered it a little bit different from some of the other ones that I've read, because if you're familiar with historical fiction, they write so many books about World War II, which I like, but I mean, after a while it can get a little repetitive and they can be kind of the same stories. But this is about a Jewish girl living in France who has to flee because they're after her. And this does deal with the Holocaust a little bit, which is, well, a lot, which is hard, and it's also a heavier book. But I really liked it because this girl named Ava goes to the border of France. She meets up with people that are a part of the French resistance, and she becomes helpful in helping them to forge documents to help Jewish children get across the border safely. And over time, she's trying to figure out how she can also preserve the identity of these children that are essentially losing them, so that they can escape and have their lives, which is really sad and really heartbreaking. But it was really interesting to see like what they did to try and preserve these children's names, and that's hence why it's called the Book of Lost Names. So I did really like this one. But again, it does deal with the Holocaust and World War II, and it is a little heavy, but it's also, the ending of it is not necessarily depressing. It's got its depressing moments in it, but the ending of it is good. I definitely recommend this one. And then moving on to book number 4, also historical fiction, is The Last Train to Key West by Chanel Cleeton. Also, I forgot to mention, I had read maybe a couple of historical fiction books prior to last year, just because I never thought that was like my thing. And this is actually the first one that I read that got me back into historical fiction. Just like, I don't know, I like history, but I didn't know that I would like reading about like fictional stories that took place during that time with like real events and stuff. But I really got hooked on it last year, and I think it is so interesting, and it's such a great way to learn about history and to really like feel for these other people that went through these things in real life, people that really experienced these things. I mean, obviously these are fictional based stories, but they deal with things that really could have happened to people, and so I just think it's so interesting. So if you've never tried historical fiction and you're like me and you think you wouldn't like it, I recommend at least trying a book out and just seeing, because like I really did get captivated by it last year. But anyways, so this is The Last Train to Key West by Chanel Cleeton, and she's a pretty popular author also. But this takes place during the 1930s, and it has 3 different stories of 3 different women intertwined into it. And it talks about how this big storm that came through the Florida Keys and was very destructive and killed a lot of people. And it talks about how it affects these women, and it kind of links all their stories together. And there's a lot of twists and turns that are kind of unexpected in it. And it was really intriguing. I read this book in like a few hours because I was so into it. So yeah, this was really interesting. And I didn't really know like that there was this big, huge, monumental storm that took place in the 1930s. So another great read that I would recommend checking out. Okay, and then the 5th and final book in the historical fiction category is The Nature of Fragile Things by Susan Meisner. And I really loved this book too. I wasn't sure when I first picked it up. It takes place in the early 1900s, the 1906 San Francisco earthquake that was a huge destruction to San Francisco. It's funny because I'm from the Bay Area and I've been to San Francisco countless times in my life. But honestly, I don't know that much about the San Francisco earthquake. I knew that it happened. I knew that there were fires and that it caused a lot of destruction and stuff. But I just like reading it in a book just really brings it alive, and really is just like, wow, like what these people went through and stuff. But this one is good because this is historical fiction mixed a little bit with mystery as well. So it really does keep you turning the pages and like trying to figure out what's going on. But essentially this is about an Irish immigrant woman named Sophie, and she agrees to be a mail order bride for a man in San Francisco, and she flies out there, or she doesn't fly out there, she goes out there without ever having met him, and his daughter also. And it talks about the bond that she forms with this daughter that just doesn't want anything to do with her at first. And it also starts to reveal that this guy is a lot shadier than she knew at first, and that he's got a lot going on that she's not aware of. And so the mystery kind of unfolds where people start arriving at her door and telling her things, and she's trying to put all these pieces together. And all this mystery like comes to the surface right as the earthquake strikes San Francisco. And so these women that have tried to come to her door to talk with her, they have to try and figure out how to get through this earthquake and through the mystery all at the same time. And they're overcoming so many hurdles, and it's really intense and just really captivating. And it was such an interesting story. And I really loved the characters in this book too. I thought they were very like real and very relatable. Not relatable, but I just felt like I knew them, you know, and like I was in the story with them. So this was another great book. And again, if you're interested in learning more about the San Francisco earthquake, this does have a lot of that in it that was real and really happened. So another great book. And then moving on to the sixth book in the thriller category now. I like thrillers and mysteries, but I don't like really creepy or gory or like horrifying ones. I can't even watch like scary movies, honestly. Like A Quiet Place is about as scary of a movie as I can like be okay with, honestly. But the first book in this category that I did read this year, surprisingly, was The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I read this during Halloween time last year, and I was not sure if I was going to be able to make it through all this because I've heard that this book is pretty creepy and pretty thrilling, but it was actually really good. It is a little creepy. It's definitely, I would never watch this as a movie, ever. I know they made this into a movie and I just couldn't watch this, but books are a little bit easier for me to handle just because they're not like as like scary, I guess. I don't know. But this is a very gripping book. Like, it does suck you in. You want to know what's happening. And there's so many just random twists and turns that like I didn't predict or didn't see coming. Essentially, it's about a woman named Anna who lives alone in New York City. And she's got all sorts of mental health issues like agoraphobia, and like she just never wants to leave her house. She's terrified of it. She's got insane like anxiety and depression. And this woman just lives a really hard life mentally, and like it's very sad. But her favorite pastime while she's alone in her house is to spy on her neighbors through her window. And she sees some things that she shouldn't see essentially happen, and it all comes to her having to really figure out if what she even saw was real, if it actually even happened. And there's so many different twists and turns, and it's crazy, but it was really interesting. It was really captivating. Again, a little bit creepy, but I'm a wimp when it comes to scary movies and stuff. So I could handle this book, but I wouldn't be able to go much beyond this. So if you're interested in this is a good, very popular book. So I would recommend it. And then my favorite thriller book that I read this year was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This book, I didn't know what to expect with this book. I knew that a lot of people had liked it and read it. And the plot sounded interesting, but I didn't know if it would really captivate me. But I read this book in a couple of hours too. It was so good. So essentially, this woman named Hannah gets a note from her husband that I guess I won't spoil what it says or anything, but it's just very short, very sweet. And then Owen ends up missing. Her husband ends up missing, and he doesn't return home. And then the FBI show up, and her and her stepdaughter, who really does not like her, have to start figuring out what happened and if Owen is even who he really is. And they're trying to figure out what the meaning of this note is. And it's just very thrilling and very interesting. And I didn't predict what was going to happen in this book. And it was very easy to read, and just like the storyline just moves and moves. And so I really did like this book. Again, I don't want to say too much about it because I will give away a lot of it. But it takes place in Sausalito too, which again, I'm from the Bay Area. So I really did like that too, because I've been there, so like I know stuff about it. But again, another great read, and this is definitely more my kind of thriller. It's not really like creepy. It's intense and it's fast moving and fast paced and stuff, but it's not like super creepy by any means. So did like this one a little bit more than The Woman in the Window, but The Woman in the Window was still really good, just much more creepy thriller kind of thing. Okay, and then the last book is just a typical fiction book. It's actually from the 90s, and it's from a really famous author named Rosamund Pilcher, and it is called September. So actually my mom is the one who shared this book with me. She said it's one of her favorite books of all time, and she's read it a lot. And I knew that Rosamund Pilcher was a really famous author and has been for several decades now, but I had never read anything from her. And this is just the essential of like homey, cozy book. Like this just makes you want to go home and hug your mom. Like it's just really like the perfect like cozy fall read. I read this in September. Like I purposely read this in September, and it was like the perfect time of year to read it. It's a slower moving book with a lot of detail and stuff, but in a good way. It's about a small town in Scotland, like a very small town where most of these people all know each other and have been friends and family members for decades. Well, obviously they've been family their whole life, but they're friends and then close family members too. One of the ladies in the town plans a party, like a dance, for one of her daughters in September. And it starts earlier in like the spring of the year, and it talks about all the plans they have, and it intertwines all of these people's lives that live in the town along with people that they're inviting to come back home to the town that they haven't seen in years and that have changed. And it talks about how all their like personalities and stories mesh and come together. And it does have a couple of like harder points in it, but overall it's a very calm, very relaxing read that just makes you feel warm and happy. And it was definitely very interesting. Again, it is not a fast-paced, like quick-moving book, but it did keep me turning the pages because I just like wanted more of the like happiness that it brought. This author does a great job of storytelling and moving the story, and it's just such a like happy and warm, just cozy book. And so I would recommend this if you've never read any of her books, or even if you have, this one was really good. I haven't read any of her other ones yet, but I do plan to do that this year. So, but definitely do recommend this book. Alrighty, so that was all of my top books of 2021. I hope that you enjoyed this and that it gave you some new ideas for books that you should read this year. Definitely check out one of these, all of them, whatever you want, and let me know if you have read any of these or if you're planning to, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.